Math Chat Live. It's a Wednesday evening here in London. So Math Chat Live is exactly what it says. We're having a chat and it's live, and it's really your show. So it's I could do this on our recording on YouTube and we could post this, of course. But that's not what Math Chat Live is about. It's about your interaction. There's a conversation happening here, and there's conversation between the two of us, but of course we want you to get involved, and you can do that by replying to this very tweet on Twitter. Just any thoughts you have or any question you have, just reply to it. So today we are almost going full circle to 1 year ago, just over 1 year ago, when I had this crazy live streaming idea, and I was pinging people around and saying, are you up for this live streaming thing? And kind of nobody even knew what it was. And our next guest was, we were just all in lockdown, sudden lockdown. It was 2 weeks after the Salle Maths conference, and we just desperately needed to just talk to each other. And our next guest kindly stepped in and helped me with this live stream malarkey, and it's just grown and grown and grown. And next guest is, if you don't know him yet, he's CEO of Salle Education, and he knows a lot about maths education and it's essentially the largest CPD network. So welcome back again, Mark.
Thank you very much for asking me back. Yeah, strange it was a year ago, wasn't it? We were doing this.
It is, yes, yeah.
Things are looking brighter now than 1 year ago. So, yeah, things are looking slightly more on the up. Schools are all opening this week rather than, was it the first, when did we do this last year? Schools had just closed, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully there's a different atmosphere out there with teachers.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Schools had just closed, and we didn't know how long they were going to be closed for, how long everything was going to be closed for. We just knew that suddenly everything is just closed.
Yeah, well, things are on the up now. So
yeah.
Have a nice positive conversation, hopefully.
Absolutely. And we're getting some questions in, but let me just start things off with something you posted recently, and I'm interested in. And I know you've always had a kind of very long-term perspective of education and mathematics education especially, and this is probably something you're working on and still trying to articulate, but you said something like education follows this 30-year cycle, which is like a pendulum that swings back and forth. So things that were fashionable 30 years ago come back, and you believe that's been the case for 180 odd years, and it looks like that trend is finally finishing, and we're going into some almost a new paradigm.
Yeah, I do. It is one of my main obsessions. There is a cycle and there's a pendulum, and they're slightly different things, and they're measuring different things. It's certainly not coming to an end. But this cycle that's been going on for about 180 years, maybe 190 when the first teacher training colleges started in the 1830s. There has been a cyclical nature to the predominant approaches in education, and that cycle lasts about 30 years, and that's not an unusual thing. Lots and lots of cycles last 30 years. If you look at the clothes that children are wearing now, they're not very different to 30 years ago. They're not very different to the 30 years before that. So fashion works in that way, music works in that way, film works in that way. And that makes a lot of sense, right? The time when you are most alert to senses and things around you is, when you're in your mid-teenage years. You're 15 years old and you're just becoming an adult, and everything matters, absolutely everything. And you know that you're the first person to ever experience any of these emotions, ever experience any of these things. Obviously you're not, but you know that you are. And this really passionate time of being 15 years old stays with people, I think. And if you fast forward 30 years, those 15-year-olds are now 45. And that kind of 45 middle-age group are the group of people who run the world. And they're the group of people who are in politics, and they're the group of people who are running large businesses, and they're the group of people who are running education and so on. So the 30-year cycle makes a lot of sense from an emotional point of view, that when people get into a position to influence and they can remember the things that matter to them dearly, it's not unusual that they say, let's start wearing the pumps that I wore when I was 15 again, right? And it's not unusual for people to think, I had a wonderful experience of schooling, and my schooling looked like whatever it looked like. Let's try and replicate that and bring all of those benefits to children as well. So the 30-year thing makes a lot of sense. And that 30-year cycle, because there are two things. There's a 30-year cycle going on, and that's about the major approaches in education. And speaking very, very, very generally, that is a cycle that is going from an emphasis on education being about thoughts and ideas, so an idea-centered education, to an emphasis of education and what it means to be educated being about self. So you can imagine the kind of Maslowian, Rogerian approaches to education, where you get people like Maslow saying, anything you learn at school, no content could possibly matter, right? Nothing of worth can be taught. That kind of view, where what matters is self and self-awareness and self-esteem. So the cycle is broadly about that different emphasis from thoughts and ideas to self and self-adoration, the worship of oneself. But there's also a pendulum that swings. And the 30-year thing is the cycle. There's also this pendulum that swings, and that pendulum goes from education systems that are highly centralized to education systems where teachers have an enormous amount of autonomy, and it swings back and forth, and the pendulum swings faster than the cycle. And that's really interesting thing if you look over the last 180 years. So one of the things that people ask me a lot is, the cycles that you talk about, the pendulum you talk about, that's obviously politics, isn't it? It's obviously political parties, and it has absolutely nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with it at all. It's not a left-right thing. Politicians have very, very little influence on education trends, very little. And if you look, for example, in the 1980s, where we have a conservative government, there's huge teacher autonomy. And then you get the Better Schools report in 1985, which suggests having a national curriculum going towards a centralized system, more centralization. And then the Conservative Party also bring in the National Numeracy Strategy and the National Literacy Strategy in 1995, which Labour continue. And then Labour really doubled down on centralization to the point of, we're not just going to tell you what a curriculum is, but we're going to tell you what to say at every 5-minute interval in every lesson. So this scripted nature of the primary strategy and where that was going, we're going to script the lessons for you. And then 2010 comes along, and the whole strategy is thrown away. And the 2010s are typified by decentralization and a kind of just get on with it, do whatever you want. And you have 2,500 multi-academy trusts, and you have 20,000 schools just told, well, there's no national strategy anymore, there's no curriculum anymore, do whatever you want. And maths can do whatever you want, you don't even have to follow the national curriculum, take whatever approaches you want. It's really weird. So they're not linked to political parties, you see, because both political parties, and you can go back much further than that, both political parties have periods of deeply centralized and also really kind of laissez-faire, get on with doing whatever you want. And the pendulum swings to and fro from centralized to get on, do whatever you want. And that pendulum right now is right at the end of do whatever you want. And what's coming is a very fast move towards really, really centralized systems. I'd be willing, Atul, right? I'll make you a £1 bet, okay? and we can meet in a pub in 4 years' time, in 2025, right? And I'm willing to bet you in 2025, by that time, there will be a highly detailed, centralized curriculum, probably produced by a multi-academy trust chain, endorsed by government, and mandated to be used in schools. Bet you. Almost scripted. And we'll head towards deep centralization again. And by the way, I think at that time there'll be a Labour government. So it's not a left-right thing, you see. And this pinging to and fro of deeply centralized, kind of paternalistic, we know best, tell me what to do, to massively trusting the profession. You guys know what you're doing, you lead it, you get on with it, teacher-led system. And that goes to and fro, to and fro. And I quite like that pendulum, because I've always felt that if the pendulum goes to one point and then stays, we lose a kind of diversity of thought. And I'm not keen on getting to a point and saying, but let's just stick with that. So I don't mind the pendulum swinging, and I also don't mind the cycle going around, even though I absolutely disagree with a couple of decades of the cycle. So I'm very much to be an educated person means a system that is idea based. It's about thoughts and ideas. It's about limitless potential. It's about the ascent of humanity. It's about contributing your part to the intellectual base of the entire planet. So I'm very much in that camp, and I'm absolutely not in the camp of what education should be is about your self-esteem, your self-worth, and your self-indulgence. But I don't mind the fact that it goes around and around. And what some people do is they ignore the cycle completely and just stick with, well, this is what I believe and this is what I'm going with. And as you know, that kind of approach, I just kind of stick with that approach always. And there are times where people say, oh, that's quite sort of the moment and very fashionable. And then most of the time people are saying, oh, you're a rotter because you care more about thoughts and ideas than you do about feeling good. So I don't mind that, but most people go with the cycle and respond to it. And what I've noticed lately, and I think it has something to do with social media, but I don't know. I think it has something to do with interconnectedness of different jurisdictions, but I don't know yet. But what I've noticed is that the cycle is moving faster than 30 years in several jurisdictions around the world. And what seems to be happening, because the 30-year cycle is common all around the world, but countries are at different points on the cycle. So in the UK, for example, if England's here on the cycle, Scotland is here and Wales is here and Ireland's here, and we're all at different points, and all going around and around. And what seems to be happening around the world at the moment is there are several jurisdictions starting to align together. And that when you look at systems, what you're seeing is a speeding up of some of the changes. And I don't know what then happens after that. So is what's going to happen that this interconnectedness of the world leads to a more homogeneous approach to thought. So the whole world starts to think in the same way and aligns with its approaches. But once that alignment has happened, it then takes 30 years again. Or is it that some countries are speeding up? And I've no idea. And I really like the fact I've got no idea. I love that. Absolutely love it. Because it's so bloody dull to be me. It's really boring being me, because I've been bleating on about this 30-year cycle forever. And things keep happening. And I look at these things happening in education, I think, well, that's exactly on cue. That's exactly what I expected to happen. And that's tedious. And now things are happening in certain jurisdictions where I think, oh, hang on, that's not supposed to be happening there yet. So it makes my life more exciting, I think. But yeah, I don't see any sign of it going away. There just is something weird happening. And I wonder if people in the fashion world, in the music world, would say the same. Um, I don't know. You know, it used to be a thing. You know, when you go to the States or wherever, and you look at the way people were dressed and think, why are you dressed the way that we were dressed 20 years ago? And they'd look at you and they'd say, why are you dressed the way we dressed 10 years ago? Because there is only 30 years in the cycle, right? You know, so I wonder if that's happening with fashion, and is it happening with music, and other domains where that matters. You know, I was talking the other night to some people about this idea, because I'd noticed this and I got excited, and it was suggested that perhaps it's happening in politics. There's a homogenization of political thought around the world. But I'm not sure that is happening. I think what's happening is a schism. So maybe there's a homogenization into two groups, but those two groups are separating out. I don't know. So anyway, I
Well,
shall not go on about it too much.
no, that's great. I mean, I probably can tell you more about the music than the education world. That's the thing I've been following for longer. But certainly for music and fashion, it's been that because of the nature. And I mean, music was sold as physical copies of records, and later on CDs and cassettes and things. And once that was finished in the early 2000s, it was just another 10 odd years for the whole thing to be homogenized. It became, you can't sell a £10 CD anymore. It's a free download.
If you think the way in which it used to spread, a band would put an album out, but the album was only one tiny part of it. What they then do is go on a multi-year world tour to spread their music. And you have to do it that way because you haven't got enough funds. In the same way that movies were released in different jurisdictions in different years. I remember watching Star Wars. 4 years after Star Wars was made, Star Wars came to the cinema in the UK. It was like, hurrah, it's here. And because the studios don't have enough money to release it worldwide, because you've got physical celluloid, right? And you're sending that around the world. And not anymore. So an album can come out to everyone in the world at an instant. Everyone can have it straight away. So I don't know, it must have something to do with technology. It's got to have something to do with social media and the way in which people are communicating, and there are educators communicating with each other in a way that was never possible before. You know, we do our maths comps and so on, but actually in the 1980s, maths teachers across the UK used to come together a heck of a lot more than they do now. So it's not the fact that we do these big conferences, but what's different is now someone in Canada can come, or Sydney, or California, or wherever it is. And maybe that's what's different, that interconnectedness. But anyway, it's something I'm writing at the moment, and I've got a lot of work to do on it.
I'd be really interested in that, because I mean, my realm, as you know, is online tutoring, and in fact I probably wouldn't be here if I didn't find in a forum 5 years ago that there are other online tutors who are doing this niche thing, out of which some said, oh, actually I'm also a teacher and I happen to go to these Salle maths conferences, you should attend one. And that's kind of helped people who were in these silos. Essentially I was in a silo for about 8 odd years, completely on my own. So this interconnectedness is allowing people with like-minded views. In the music world, you would have had this kind of, currently we are now in this rock genre, or that's rock is in, or this is in, or that's in, but now nothing is in, everything is in all at the same time. It's the same with fashion, like all the genres are in, because on this digital distribution.
Imagine if that happens in education. So I was saying they're moving at different speeds now, and there seems to be there are some alignments going on. But what if that happened? The thing you're describing with music and fashion. What if that happened, where instead of there being an alignment to one thing, and then we all move at 30 years? What if all of the things came together at once? That'd be weird. Because one of the really strange things we have in education, it's an odd domain. It's not like other professions in that there are no shared standards of excellence. They've never been developed. They've never been articulated. Education is a fight. It's a battleground of ideas. And it's why you can't do things like you can't do coaching in education. And I see coaching programs all the time. So there are lots of bodies that run coaching programs for teachers. We're going to coach you. Well, how can you coach someone if there are no shared standards of excellence? If there's no thing that educated people aspire to, if there's no thing where educators think that is what exemplifies excellence in our domain, you can't possibly coach. It's why you can't do deliberate practice in education, because there are no shared standards of excellence. And you need those shared standards of excellence to say, this is what I'm taking you to. So it would be a weird thing to if it wasn't an alignment and it was actually an amalgam of lots of different ideas, because then you do get into that diversity of thought thing, where one of the things about different groups can have their standard of excellence, like music, right? So there are lots of people that like rock and lots of people that like pop, and you can have different standards of excellence. But if you want to have what do we count as a shared standard of excellence in music, that requires those groups to come together and say, what is it about each of our shared standards of excellence that really, really matters? Why is it that Mozart has lasted so long? Why is that something we look at and say, that is excellence? Tchaikovsky, that is excellence. Why is it we say that? And that's because they're the standards that civilized people aspire to, right? We've taken all the different things from the whole domain of music and we've said, okay, so what's technically difficult and what's beautiful? And, it's about having a sense of beauty and aesthetic. And then we say, so this is what we consider to be excellent. But that hasn't happened in education. That's why education is this battleground. That's why you go on Twitter and there are people arguing out trad and prog and whatever. And that's just like music, right? It's traditional music and progressive rock, right? Fighting about those things. Except musicians don't. Musicians go, that's all right, man. You can like that. I like this. But excellence in music means, and we do know what that means, right? We know what is technically difficult to perform. We know, you can see someone play the violin or the guitar or the piano, whatever it is, and you can know there's probably only 5 people on the planet who can do what that person just did with their hands. That's why we have these shared standards of excellence in music. But it's a very different thing in education. I think I might be coming to my new mission: shared standards of excellence. I mean, no one's ever going to pull it off. Absolutely no chance. People have been trying to do that for 180 years, and there's no way of doing it. But anyway, I'll move on from the cycle.
No, that's great. No, we've got some comments coming in. We've got Darren Elgar and Mr. Rogers both posting. I'll go with Darren's question first. Darren, what are your views on streaming in primary?
Streaming. So, well, let's just get the words out there first. So, streaming and setting are not the same thing. So it's really important to get that out there. There'll be people listening in different countries, and streaming has a different meaning. So, for example, streaming means something different in Australia than it does in the UK. So, in the UK, setting is where we rank order pupils based on some attainment measure, some test or whatever it is, and we rank order them, and we say this is the top group, and this is the next group, and this is the next group, and we put them in those sets, and those sets have a curriculum to do that. And we do that for mathematics, and we do it for English, and we do it for science, and we do it for whatever. In the UK, what streaming means is we take some measure, not an attainment measure, but maybe some some broader measure of a child's cognitive ability across a lot of subjects. And then we say, okay, so you're kind of in this area, so you're going to be in this group, and this will be the top group, and you're going to be in that top group for maths, English, and science, and whatever. So they're very different things, because in a setted approach, you have a greater chance of saying this what we're calling the top group here, these 30 pupils, say, you've got a greater chance of their attainment being close to each other. You know, if the quiz or the test is decent, there'll be outliers in that top set. You know, there'll be flukes on the day, and there'll be pupils in bottom set that just had a terrible day and all that kind of stuff. But you've got a better chance. Whereas with streaming, you could well have someone being asked to study really quite demanding mathematics because their verbal skills were very high, or their reading skills were very high. So that broad measure of cognitive ability has put them into the top group. Equally, you might have someone in the top English set being asked to do something really quite demanding because their work with data was very good, or their logic was very good. So I just thought we better say that, otherwise my answer will cause a hoo-ha. So to Darren's actual question, what do I think about streaming in primary? I think, Darren, that streaming is a bloody awful system in any age group. I really, really don't like it. To not bother to take a domain seriously, a subject seriously, and to not bother to try to provide the best possible chances in that subject doesn't seem like a good idea to me. And the vast majority of schools that use streaming rather than setting are using streaming because they think it's hard to write a school timetable, right? So, you know, it's just easier to stream the pupils, and then we have to worry about all the sets and having different year groups on at different times and all this kind of stuff. That's the main reason people use streaming. And I just think, well, you know, if you think writing a school timetable is really difficult, you probably shouldn't be given the job of writing a school timetable. It's not difficult to do. I mean, it's hard, right? It's a lot of bloody work. You've got to sit down and do a lot of stuff. It takes a long time to do, but it's not beyond the wit of man to come up with a system that serves the needs of individual subjects. So I think streaming's awful. It's just a stupid, lazy system. I despise it, as you can probably tell. Setting, on the other hand, I would rather setting didn't have to exist, because I would rather that people realize that every single child has limitless potential and can learn every single thing. And I would rather that from day one we make sure that happens, so that all pupils are reaching their boundless, limitless potential and able to work at the top always. So we wouldn't have the need to look at trying to get the attainment gaps low by doing sets. So I'd much rather that was the case, in other words, a mastery approach. But if you are faced with a year group in year 4, say, in primary, you've got a year 4 group, and there is a huge range of attainment, which would be the norm in schools in England, then I think that taking their individual curriculum pathways seriously might be a good thing to do. And it's logistically difficult in primary. If you've got a 1-form or 2-form entry primary school, then you're really probably talking about in-class grouping, which again is another system. So the class is completely mixed, but when you segue from one subject to the other subject, you look at different grouping structures and you ask pupils to work on tasks appropriate to those pupils. And I think there's something to be said for that. But it irks me that we unnecessarily create this system where setting is even needed. It's unnecessary. There are so many people who believe that children have different potentials, that being good at maths is some kind of innate flair, some luck of birth, and that just is not true. Every single child can be good at maths or English or science or music or art or anything at all. They can all be great at it. They've got limitless potential when they're born. The fact they end up having a huge attainment gap 4 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line is a result of the education they're receiving. It's not because of their cognitive potential. They can all be experts in anything they want to be expert in. So, yeah, I'd rather it didn't have to happen. But if there is a big attainment gap, go for setting. Never, ever, ever go for streaming. It's just the lazy fool's approach to timetabling. And I don't think that's a good reason.
Yeah. Well, it's very good you clarify that, because Darren just replied it with straight away, more or less. I meant setting and for maths only, which you've essentially answered as well, because you just said...
Yeah, and quite, there are lots of places around the world where streaming is used as we use setting. The word streaming is used as the way we use the word setting. So that's perfectly understandable. I just wanted to make sure I was answering the correct question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I completely agree with you with every child's potential. It's, I mean, I do the one-on-one tutoring, obviously. So, but I see them in that just one person light, and it's fairly common. I'm teaching children who've just been pulled out. They're 16, they're 18. Some have become adults. They don't know the number bonds, but use the right representations. And with the right timing, with the right pace, and they pick it up. And 18-year-olds had 18-year-olds of life experience, so they actually use bridging and they pick up things. They're very familiar with a lot of stuff already, and the stuff starts coming together very quickly as well, in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, look, we either believe that the process of teaching can have a profound impact on a child, or we don't. And if we don't believe that teaching can have a profound impact on a child, well, let's just close all the schools and stop doing it. But it can have a profound impact on a child. And with every single one of them, you can get them to overcome the difficulties they're having, and you can get them to, in our case, become mathematically literate, say, as a minimum. If we could do that for every child, if every child could leave school just mathematically literate. So I'm not asking them to, be absolutely into maths and love it and want to study every nook and cranny of it, but you can get them all to become mathematically literate without a great deal of difficulty, as long as you believe, as a teacher, as long as you believe that they have the potential. There are no, it's like the number of people you hear, and you'll hear teachers say this as well. I'm not really a maths person, or I'm not really an artist, or I'm not really a musician. I can't sing. You hear people say, I can't sing. Of course you can sing. Of course you can. Well, no, I can't hold a tune. No, you just haven't tried hard enough. You haven't practiced hard enough. You haven't given it enough shot, and you haven't listened to an expert who tells you how to control your diaphragm and how to, you just haven't applied yourself enough to it. And you don't have to, right? There's no reason why you have to be able to sing. There's no reason why you have to be a great mathematician. But it's not because you can't. It's because you won't. And that's true of everyone, of everything, right? Almost all human beings, in almost everything they do, accept good enough. And that's fine. That's the way it has to be. We don't, if you play football, you don't become obsessed with being Pele. You just want to have a kick around with your friends and for it to be joyful. So being good enough at football makes it joyful, and it feels comfortable and happy. Being good enough at singing means you can do a bit of karaoke occasionally and not make a complete fool of yourself. And people accept being good enough because you have to, because there are so many different domains and you can't become expert in every domain. But it isn't because you don't have the potential. You do have the potential to be a singer, to be a mathematician, to be a scientist, to be a great writer. everyone has that potential. It's because you haven't applied yourself in a very precise way, very precise, detailed way, and for long enough. That's all it is. And I often think of schooling as being a bit like the process of being at school is a bit like a race to become determined, like really determined to do something. And the role of teachers, because you're not going to get them to be determined in 15 domains, right? So nobody becomes determined to be a musician and an artist and a mathematician and a scientist. Well, not many people anyway, right? So what we're trying to do in our subject areas is trying to get pupils to become determined, because learning is hard. It's not comfortable. Like being just good enough at football is comfortable, it's joyful, it feels nice. But being an expert football player who can play at the top of their game is hell. It's absolutely awful. It's difficult. And when you ask people, a footballer or a tennis player, a chess player or a mathematician or an author or a musician, when you ask people right at the top of their game, do you enjoy, you say the tennis player who never sees their family and they spend all the time on the court practicing. Do you enjoy practicing tennis? And they all say, no, I hate it. It's awful. But that's what it takes to become expert, right? You have to find the thing that you can persevere through extreme tedium. You can persevere and keep going, find that one thing, and there's your expertise. And isn't it great that schools, we have all these domains, so there'll be a bunch of kids in their 13 years and they'll become determined to become mathematicians. That's great. And they'll work out and become experts. Wow, amazing. And there'll be ones who are poets and ones who are artists and ones who are authors and ones who are geographers and scientists. Because they'll break through the thing of, I am willing to doggedly pursue this subject and work through discomfort. To become really expert at mathematics requires an enormous amount of practice. And nobody wants to do an enormous amount of practice in something they're not determined about. And sometimes it's argued that is a love of, so finding a love of mathematics, or you really enjoy it. But that doesn't seem to be the case either. Ask world-class chess players. Enjoyment is not the thing. The enjoyment of the learning every move in chess. It's not enjoyment. It's something. It's the product of it later. It's what you become later. It seems to be driving them. And every single person can do it. Everyone. When you one of the things we used to do in inspection, and still probably does happen, is this: follow a child. So instead of inspecting the class, pick a child and follow them through all their lessons, the lessons that they go to. When you do that, you'll come across teachers who will tell you that child who you're following, that particular child, is, badly behaved or doesn't like school or never focuses, never works, that kind of thing. Then you'll follow them to another lesson, and another teacher will say, they are the most determined, they are the most passionate, the most dedicated pupil I've ever met. And it's just that, finding that domain. So in mathematics, as maths teachers, because we love it and we know what can come of all of that hard work, because we love it, we're trying to, during their 13 years, we're trying to make the pupils in our classrooms break through, persevere through tedium, persevere through difficulty, because then you can go on to expertise, and that feels amazing. And you won't win them all, of course you won't win them all. And for everyone else, make them good enough. And good enough is mathematically literate, can go into the world, be autonomous, be the poet they want to be, but not get ripped off on their mortgage. Make them good enough in all their other domains, but make sure that school finds the thing, the one thing. If there's a purpose of schooling, it's for every single child to find where they are the expert. And they're all expert in something, every one of them. And we need that expertise. There's 7 billion of us on this planet. We need everyone's expertise to chip in and contribute to the challenges we're going to face. So that's what schooling's about. I think I've gone slightly off.
No, that's all good. I mean, that's where this, we have to examine, continuously reevaluate the purpose of learning and connect with it. I take my own private singing lessons, and sometimes people say, why on earth are you taking singing lessons? You can sing. I said, no, I can't sing. There's still loads to be learned.
And you need a coach, right?
Yeah.
You need someone to say, we know what the standards of excellence are. We know how experts acquired those standards of excellence. They did it using these techniques. So I'm telling you the techniques. Follow them. And you get that. That's what coaching is, because you know the standard of excellence. So you can coach towards those standards of excellence. And mathematics, so although you can't do coaching or deliberate practice in education, in being a teacher, mathematics definitely has agreed standards of excellence. And we do know the steps to get there. And we do know how experts got there. And it's really important that teachers are spotting when pupils are working. Teachers are spotting common mistakes that pupils are making, and they tell them, that thing there, we're going to fix that thing there. That very specific part of a problem, or you always, when you're doing some kind of problem, you always make this error. Let's fix that error. We're going to work on it until it's fixed. And I'm going to tell you how expert mathematicians have dealt with that very same problem in the past, how they've dealt with it, how they've made sense of it, got their heads around it. I'm going to tell you that, and then we're going to practice, and practice, such that you have a much lower chance of making those mistakes in the future. It's exactly the same as learning tennis or chess, or how to sing, or how to play the guitar, or anything that has standards of excellence. We can do that. So yeah, you need that coach. You need someone there to be giving you the expertise, and that pinpointed expertise, the pinpointing the very specific thing. So let's fix this specific thing in this specific way. That pinpointing, that coaching, that's what really great teachers do. And when you realize that there isn't a child in your class at all who can't do maths, when you realize there are none of those at all, because you can do this process of very, very specifically fixing specific problems, then you're in this wonderful environment of self-fulfilling prophecy, because you end up with everyone feeling success and building up together, which gets rid of the need for sets, which just comes back to our question from earlier.
Right at the beginning, yeah. Yeah, Tom Rogers has also, he had a follow-up while we were talking about just the standards of excellence and that type of teaching philosophy, and that he just said, he's questioning, I thought there were lots of frameworks around, and that there are actually teacher standards, surely.
Yeah. So in the cycle and on the pendulum, each part of the cycle has its view of excellence. Okay? And that moves around and around and around. What the profession doesn't have and has never been able to acquire, because it is a battleground, the profession doesn't have agreed standards of excellence. So those of us, so people like me who would be followers of John Carroll, say, and then people who are, say, followers of the Rogerian model. We do not agree on standards of excellence. And they're poles apart. And that work has never happened to take the entire profession and say, these are my standards of excellence, these are your standards of excellence. What are the agreed things in here? What is it that actually, what does an educated person, what does it mean to be an educated person? And we've never come to an agreed point on that. So all the factions in education have a different view. If you say, what does it mean to be an educated person? People have a very different view of that. If you say, what is the purpose of schooling? People have very, very different view of that across the education system. So although there are standards, they are fleeting. If you look at what would be considered, take the inspection framework today and take the inspection framework of 2002, they are not the same standards of excellence, and they are fleeting. So the things that are around at the moment, they won't last. They're on the way out. You can let's take a really simple example just to make the point. So for example, at the moment, one of the views that Ofsted holds at the moment, which is the inspection, the regulator in England, for those listening not in England, one of the views that Ofsted has is that they should not have a view on whether schools mark books or not. Okay, so that is a view. To say that we have no view is a view. Right? It's a position. So their position is, we have no view on whether you should mark books or not. What we'll do is we'll come and look at your assessment policy and we'll make sure it aligns with the assessment policy, do the regulating part of it, being the regulator. That was not the case in 2002, and that will not be the case in 2025. That it's a fleeting thing. A centralized scheme is on its way. A really detailed centralized scheme is coming, where lesson by lesson will be prescribed. And the view of the regulator will then be, what we expect to see is this happening in this classroom. Like in the 2000s, where Ofsted inspectors had a little ready reckoner. So you could walk into, as a non-specialist, you could walk into year 8 history, and you open up your little book and you could see, I'm in year 8 history, so what I should be witnessing is, and then you can see if you're witnessing that or not. Now you can't do that when the pendulum swings to teacher autonomy, because you don't have the centralized view of this is what should be happening. So yeah, Tom is absolutely right. There are standards, but there are not shared standards of excellence in the profession. So that's what I'm arguing for, is trying to somehow overcome a 180-year war to arrive at shared standards of excellence. Because I think it would be useful, because then you could do coaching and deliberate practice. The other thing that might be useful is if this cycle wasn't moving all the time, maybe people would stay in teaching. Teaching has such a huge problem with retention. There's no real recruitment problem in teaching. There's certainly no shortage of qualified maths teachers. There's an enormous glut, an enormous oversupply of qualified maths teachers. It's just they're not teaching. They left and they're doing other things. But there's loads of qualified maths teachers. But people sometimes leave education mean, the main thing is behavior and autonomy, but there are people who leave education because they get a sense of there being a dishonesty in the system, where you're told 1 year, if you're not doing a 3-part lesson, you're a bad teacher. And then another year you're told, if you're not doing this kind of, if you're not doing simultaneous equations through the medium of mime, you're a failure. And then another few years down the line, you're told if your children are not sitting in individual desks, all facing the front, and the church of your classroom has not been completely whitewashed, so there are no distractions, then you're a failure. And there are people in education where they think this is just dishonest to keep doing this, and that would not be the case if we had shared standards of excellence. Yeah, it's a good aim. It's not going to happen in my lifetime, but it's a good aim. So I think it'd be a very, really useful thing to have. Anyway.
Yeah, Mathematag on Periscope. Let's follow up. Have you seen the 5 mathematical proficiencies in the new curriculum for Wales? If so, what is your opinion of them?
Yes, I have. So Wales is a very interesting situation that's happening in Wales at the moment. So for people who are listening who have no idea what's going on in Wales, Wales is going through quite a process or quite an attempt at reform. And in some respects is quite similar to some of the work that Scotland did 15 years ago. Although they have some of the same consultants, there's also quite a lot of difference to it. Wales has, because of the size of the country and the small system and the ease of being able to communicate with all of the schools, Wales has one heck of an opportunity to do something remarkable. But it, at the moment, doesn't seem to be seizing the opportunity to do something remarkable. It's moving slowly, and there have certainly been some significant improvements in the last year away from some of the stuff that had initially been proposed. So basically the relegating of subjects, I don't think is a very useful thing to do. I think that subjects matter a lot, and some of the extreme view of that seems to have gone away. So as we're in a public forum, and I really, really, really want Wales to succeed and do well, because it has one hell of an opportunity. And actually, there are some really good people working in the system there. I will refrain from commenting specifically on the standards, because, they're conversations best had offline, I think. So that's all I'll say on that.
No, fair enough. That sounds good. Okay. So that's a couple of questions. So if you are tuned in and you have any more questions, do keep them coming. I've got plenty of questions, so I'll keep asking. I know you've got a great series of blogs on your own blog, the Ask Mark, and you also had an interview with Hannah, who's joined your team recently, and there's some really, really good questions, and I've just got to kind of follow up on one of those. Salle, I'm just looking at the blog post there. You have a belief in the importance of mathematical thinking, and then you explain that in the blog, and then there's another question: how might all teachers promote mathematical thinking in the classroom? So if you can kind of just explain that to any viewers who haven't seen that.
Well, the easiest way to promote it is to do it, is to think out loud in front of children. And it can feel a little odd to do, because it's not real. But surely we do that in front of children all the time, just act in front of them to communicate ideas and to storytell and so on. So yeah, actually doing it in front of them, putting a problem up on the board and saying, oh, what's this about? I wonder how we solve this. I wonder what methods that I know that are in my mind that I could use to attack this problem. I don't know the answer to this yet, but if I worked on this diligently, carefully, using various tools, I reckon I could get there. And that thing of, I don't know the answer to this yet, I think is the single most important thing that maths teachers can say out loud in front of a class when they're teaching. Because somehow we've got to a situation, well, it's not somehow, it's because of where we are in the cycle. We've got to a situation where what very often happens is a teacher will have some questions on the board, they've done some explanation, they'll have some questions on the board, and they'll say to the pupils, so it's your turn to work on these questions. And pupils will instantly raise their hand and say, I can't do this. We've created this situation where pupils have this false impression of mathematics, where they think the way in which mathematics works is I'm shown something and I instantly know what to do, and I instantly know the answer. And that's nothing like mathematics at all. That's not what mathematicians do. And is just dull. If you're shown something and you know the resolution, you know the answer to it, what's the point? Why are you there? Why are you going through this experience? So we've somehow got to this position where children expect to know instantly what to do and what the answer will be. Whereas if you continually narrate in front of them, oh, here's a problem. I wonder how I solve this. And I don't know how to solve this yet, but I do know lots of things about. And if I pull these things in here and I use these tools here and I start attacking this, maybe some of it will start to become clear. And then, of course, it's really important as a teacher that you choose some routes that don't help. Right? So you do some stuff on it and go, oh, no, hang on there. This has made it harder. It's got more complex. Let's step back from this. And let's play with this again in a different way. What other methods do I know? So this problem is about circles or whatever. This problem's about circles. What other things do I know about circles? Let me try that with this. Pupils should be able to see their teacher struggling with a mathematical problem in front of them. And they should be able to see, whilst their teacher is struggling with this mathematical problem, that they are full of joy because it's a struggle. Because it's a struggle. That's why it's joyful, because there's meaning and purpose in overcoming something difficult. Doing things that are, that's that. So what? Who cares about that? Now, of course, you will end up at a point where you have a lot of fluent, fast recall of facts and ideas. Of course you do. And things you'll know. That's great. But those things that are instant and you do know straight away, that's not what's great about them. It's the fact you can then use them to attack problems that you don't know the answer to. The fact that I don't have to think when I see a division because I just know what it is. That in itself is not particularly interesting. It's the fact that I can now attack more difficult things using all that stuff I've got up my sleeve. And one of the problems that, or one of the reasons perhaps that children just go, can't do it. One of the reasons that might have emerged is because quite a lot of mathematical education systems have as their aim automaticity and speed. They have that as their aim, automaticity, fluency. So the point at which you no longer have to give attention, you can just perform. They have that as their end point, rather than realizing that's just a step. If you have automaticity, if you don't have to think to do something, then you're in that just good enough at tennis thing. I don't have to try really very hard. It's comfortable, it's easy. I feel happy about this. You're in that space. In other words, you're not training this muscle anymore. You're not tearing neurons apart and laying down myelin and building new networks. You're not doing any of that when you're comfortable. That's only occurring when you're struggling, when things are difficult. So perhaps one of the reasons that we have that can't do it is because systems are set up to praise and reward automaticity instead of praising and rewarding, well, I can't do this yet, so I'll fight with it, you know? And that's the same in all domains, right? I'm sure you are exactly like me, that, you know, you watch someone do something on the guitar and you think, my hand can't do that. I literally, my hand physically can't make that move. So I'm going to keep going through pain day after day after day after day until this finger goes to the position I want it to, you know, until I can make these fingers span this amount. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep struggling with it. And then, of course, you get to the point afterwards. It's the success afterwards. That's what's really amazing. And it's just the same with maths. You know, it's exactly the same process, except this is the thing, rather than your fingers or your serving arm or whatever it is. It's in here. And it's literally about physically tearing apart neurons and neural pathways, tearing them apart and creating new pathways. And that only happens when you're struggling. So, yeah, I think being mathematical in front of children is how you make it happen. In the same way as being a pianist in front of your piano tutor is how you make it happen. You know, I often say, you know, that it's like a piano teacher can say to a child, to make this tune happen, you press these keys in this order at this speed. I will tell you what the keys are. All right, so you press C, then E, then F, all right, and you do it at this speed, and that will make this tune here happen. And the pupil at that point can know how to make the tune happen. I press those keys in that order at that speed, but it doesn't mean they can play the tune. They have to do. And that's exactly the same in mathematics. We can tell pupils to find the area of this circle, you do these things here. Or to solve this quadratic equation, you do these steps here. And the pupils can say to you, when you say to them, how do you solve a quadratic equation? They'll say, well, you do this, 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 and this, and this. But it doesn't mean they can solve a quadratic equation. And they have to do it. They have to actually struggle with it and work on it and practice with it. So yeah, being mathematical in front of children and remembering as a teacher that mathematical, see, maths is an epistemological model. It's a view of knowledge itself. It's a way of thinking about knowledge, a way of being, and remembering as a teacher that maths is not a list of questions to answer. Maths is, being a mathematician is being in joy when you realize you don't know something. Feeling joy about that. Because when you don't know something, you then suddenly have an opportunity to do something interesting. And living that in front of children all of the time, and remembering that that's what the case is. And you can do it in all aspects of your life. Mathematicians just love the whole thing of, don't know what this is yet. You know, it's like the 30-year cycle thing we were talking about. For this thing I'm writing at the moment, I came back to this, and this is something I've written about many, many times in the past. I've spoken about many, many times, and I say this is the truth, right? This is what's happening. This is what's happened over the last 180 years. And I've been doing these weeks of research and realized that I'm now wrong. It was what was known at that time was fine. But it's not true anymore. And that's amazing. That's absolutely wonderful and joyful. And children need to see an adult in front of them giving off that this is who we are, you see. This, you know what poets do, right? You know what artists do. You know what tennis players do. You probably know what scientists do to some regard. But mathematicians, who are they? You know, what do they do? What are they like as people? How do they feel? What makes them excited? Well, one of the biggest things is being stuck. It's just great because you have opportunity. So act it in front of children. Deliberately choose some occasions where the tools you take out of your toolkit to solve the problem don't work, because it's important that they realize that some things in mathematics lead to dead ends. It's also important they realize that sometimes you just go attacking a problem with no idea where it will go. And it's really important that children realize that some of those occasions where you just pursue something not knowing where the maths is going to go have led to some of the most astounding discoveries in mathematics. You know, so mathematics for the sake of mathematics, its own intellectual pursuit, its own, you know, the pleasure that comes from just messing around with it.
Oh, absolutely love it. I mean, Paul Lockhart in his book as well, A Mathematician's Lament, right at the end he says, as a teacher, you've got to love living in the mathematical jungle of reality. Just don't, but the mathematical jungle is exactly what it is. You don't know what's out there. And you have to enjoy living in that mathematical jungle, and you have to.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a brilliant book. It's a really great book, that is. And it, you know, it is odd that I was saying earlier that education is about a race to make a child be determined to pursue your domain because you love it, right? And you want them to pursue it. They're not going to become determined to be mathematicians if they never meet one. And, you know, that might be a problem. We do not have a population of teachers who are mathematicians. Loads of them are, but loads of people will say, but I'm not. You know, you get lots of people teaching maths to say, I'm not a mathematician. Maybe you teach primary and your subject is something else. Fine. But in front of children, you've got to be. And in the same way that, you know, if I'm teaching children a subject that doesn't particularly set me on fire, they still think it does. You know, it's one of the things I used to love doing cover lessons, and just go do a cover lesson of any old subject, and making sure that the kids in front of you, because they know you from somewhere else in the school, right? They know you as a maths person, and you wander in, you start teaching a French lesson or whatever with absolute joy, and they think, bloody hell. And even if I shouldn't have chose French, actually, because I do find a great deal of joy in languages, but even if it was a subject that doesn't really set you alight, in front of them it has to. It's so important. Teaching does have a profound impact on children. It really does. And we can't forget that for any moment. One of the worst things I ever saw in my career, and this is extraordinarily rare, and you know, basically never happens. But the worst thing I ever saw was I was in a primary classroom, and the pupils were doing numeracy hour. So it's quite a long time ago. They're doing numeracy hour, the scripted hour, and the teacher's going through this script. And after that, they were going to do some art. So they'd already done literacy hour, then they were doing numeracy hour. They were going to have a break. They were going to do some art. And we got to the end of numeracy hour, and the teacher clapped her hands and said, "Well, thank goodness that's over. We can do some art now." And I just can't believe that teacher couldn't see the profound impact that comment has on children. Even if you are not particularly set alight by mathematics, make sure you are in front of them. Just act. That's 90% of teaching, right? Just act like it's the thing you love for an hour, because you might change a kid's life, and they might be the one who could become determined to be an expert mathematician, and they might be the expert who ends up solving some of humanity's greatest problems. So don't ever underestimate the potential that's in that classroom and the impact you have on that potential. So, anyway, I didn't want to go all preachy about that.
No, that's great. I mean, well,
that practically never ever happens, but it was just one occasion that sticks with me. It doesn't typify teachers at all. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, in our debrief after the MathsCon 25, we referred to, quite a lot of us referred to Lime's Wright's workshop, where she just talked about the social learning theory. You know, we are social people. We pick up all the social cues and social emotions, and if there is someone, as you described, has maths anxiety and they haven't faked it and they really are anxious about it, the children will pick it up, and the children will pick up their lack of enthusiasm. Not just children, anyone else, right? In a conversation, they'll just pick your enthusiasm or lack of.
You just gotta pretend. I remember being in the Peak District with year 8 or year 7, can't remember, and one of my colleagues, Miss Strachan, who was, you know, an older teacher, shall we say, and we're in the Peak District, and we were going to get the kids to do some abseiling, and some of the kids were kind of a bit scared, and she did not like heights, and walked right over to the edge of the cliff and assured the children it's all fine, it's all very safe, tugged on a rope and said, you know, the people are here to help you and all this kind of stuff. The children suddenly are like, well, Miss is over there, yeah, we can do it too. Then she went to the minibus and nearly threw up. But, you know, in front of the kids, you've just got to pull it out of the bag and do what's right for them. Yeah. You just act as a mathematician for an hour and don't, think stop some potential from emerging.
Yeah, I've got some comments coming in from Donovan. Here, math teaching should make one's ears tingle with delight.
Was that ears? Ears tingle.
Ears, yeah. And another one based on the 30-year cycle and teaching standards. Again, Donovan, the airline industry has agreed standards of practice throughout the world. Why not maths teaching?
Yeah. Why not maths teaching? The airline industry is interesting, right? So no matter where you fly in the world, no matter what your nationality as a pilot, you speak English, right? You have to speak English. And that's all around the world. And the way in which you respond to instructions is identical. And everything is standardized. Getting it wrong is pretty obvious if you're an airline pilot. So maybe that has something to do with it. What does getting it wrong look like as an education system? Well, the majority of children in the UK leave school with a pretty low set of mathematical skills. Yet we still don't think we're getting it wrong. I mean, what is it we need to do to say we really need to sort this out and stop fighting, stop the 180-year war? We really need to take this seriously. Children that are being born today, we need to take their education seriously. It matters. It matters a lot. And what does it have to look like to get to that point? It's sort of things that keep me awake at night. That humanity, I'll be dead, so it doesn't really matter to me, but I kind of care about it. Humanity is going to face some incredible challenges, and every single human being that doesn't fulfill their entire potential, their cognitive potential, and what they could be and the problems they could solve, is an enormous loss to humanity. So the fact that right now the majority, it's not even just some, it's the majority of people leave schooling with a really poor grasp of mathematics. Isn't that a loud enough alarm? Shouldn't we be doing something? Yeah, it's absolutely right. Why not? Why not maths teaching?
I mean, what's the statistic like? I mean, we had Pete Matic saying on a mass chat live as well. It's there's only a fifth of the students can answer about half the questions on a GCSE paper, and
yeah, I mean, so you can look at the exam grades and what people are doing in exam grades, how many people are getting grade 4, how many people are getting grade 5, and that kind of thing. But first, what you got to do is look at, does that even matter? Like grade 4 after 13 years of schooling, that's no expectation. That's no expectation from a biological being that has unlimited potential for cognitive expansion, to expect them to get what is expected of a grade 4 GCSE. We should be ashamed about that. we should as a society, we should be ashamed that that's what we're expecting after 13 years. So the statistics doesn't give you what we need. It doesn't tell us what we need to know. Well, it's more a question of thinking. So what is a human being's potential, cognitive potential, and how much of that is being fulfilled? It's really, really low. So yeah, I don't know the solution to it, because I don't know the solution to ending the bickering and taking education really seriously. So yeah, keep banging the drum, and maybe someone knows the solution and they can tell us.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, aerospace is something I worked on for a bit. It's but the consequences of getting it wrong are fairly severe. So we have ISO's international standards and agreements, and people learn from mistakes.
Yeah, they're really severe and they're really obvious. You can't hide from it. The trouble is, I think we spoke about this last year actually. The trouble is the outcome of education happens long after education. Someone's 30, 35, 40 before you really get to see what the impact was. And they've long since left the system, and it's extraordinarily difficult. It's nigh on impossible to track. So it's really difficult to see. And maybe you look at proxies. I don't know. The whole of the UK, and hopefully this won't put people who are listening not in the UK off the UK, The whole of the UK is swimming in litter. Now, a smart society wouldn't do that, would they? A smart society wouldn't cover all of their roads and fields and hedges with plastic. So, you know, these are very complex things to work out what the outcome is, and they come long after schooling. But I would suggest enough alarm bells are ringing for us to maybe try to do something about it. I think these things kind of matter, you know, and I know of no better way of humanity overcoming the challenges it faces than to make every individual as learned as possible. I don't know any other better solution than that. So I think we should be aiming for that. And the only way we can aim for that is if the people who are entrusted with people's children and to deliver an education know, understand, and believe and act out accordingly the fact that every child has limitless potential and behave in that way, rather than the occasional person you will hear who will say, "Oh, but not that child. They're never going to get this." Or the person that says, "I can't sing," or "I'm not a maths person," or "I can't write." Yes, you can. And somehow, of the 500,000 people or so working in schools, somehow we've got to get that message out there as loudly as possible and try to win that argument. And then all the little fights, the silly little ones like setting versus mixed ability, prog versus trad, all these little ones just go away if instead we focus on the fact that every child can learn everything. Let's make that happen. And let's not give up on any of them. Then the rest of it goes away. So anyway, that's all rather heavy.
No, it's great. Just bringing back to the whole point of learning. Teachers are clearly back at home, so some questions are coming in, but we are going to start wrapping up now. I know you have to go, but so I'll take this one as a last one. This one's from Neil Armand. Hi Neil. But actually, while you're there, we'd love to have you on as well on Maths Chat Live. You've been recommended. But anyway, Neil Armand, what can be done to make unenthusiastic, unconfident primary teachers to see maths as joyful?
I don't know many unenthusiastic primary teachers. So I'll start with that. But I suppose what Neil means is unenthusiastic about mathematics. But like everyone else, they have things that set them alight, things that are of interest to them, things that they are enthusiastic about, things that they love and adore, and so on. And when you see someone in any domain really love it and espouse that to you, live it in front of you, it's kind of hard not to be infected by that. It's difficult. So what I would suggest is that people like Neil, so first of all, Neil, you've got to come on Atul's show and do an interview. People like Neil and the many thousands of other primary practitioners who absolutely love mathematics need to show your colleagues your love of it and espouse it and live it in the same way that, you know, someone will catch you in the staff room and tell you about the music they love or the poetry they love or the films they love. And it's hard not to be infected by people's enthusiasms. So I think living those enthusiasms in front of your colleagues is a really important thing to do. There are mechanical things that would help enormously. So mechanical things around, for example, the curriculum and assessment and tasks and activities. There are ways in which you can take written curricula, so the intended curriculum. There are ways in which you can take those kind of documents and imbue in them the excitement and joy and the love of mathematics. And they can be through tasks, right? The kind of tasks that you ask a year one or year two or year three teacher to present and go through with their class under the title of mathematics makes a huge difference to how they feel about mathematics. And if what they're being told to do and what they're being held account for and what they're being measured against is a curriculum that is all about automaticity and speed and never about thinking, contemplating, fighting with things, doing tasks that last ages, also doing tons of deliberate practice to fix very, very specific things. So there are mechanistic things you can do to spread that amongst primary teachers. And in a way, the primary national strategy attempted to do that. So part of the argument there was, well, obviously we've got generalist workforce for very good reasons, particularly in early years, like up to age 7, age 8, for very good reasons. We have a generalist workforce. And they can't be expected to adore every subject or know every subject. So let's put this document together and let's try to, through our scripting of it, make it exciting and interesting and joyful. And one of the interesting things about the early days of the primary strategy was that quite a lot of primary teachers self-reported themselves enjoying the lessons much more because of the kind of activities and tasks that the pupils were then working on compared to what they had been working on previously. So there are mechanical things that you can do as well. I fear, however, that as we go to me winning £1 off Atul in 4 years' time, and we have a very centralized scripted curriculum, I fear that it is unlikely that that curriculum that will be endorsed by government will attempt to spread the joy of mathematics. So I hope not, but that would be my concern about doing that. So yeah, just bang the drum a lot now about it. Tell people you love it. It's a rather odd moment. Yeah, it's when you rock up to a staff room and you sit down next to a bunch of colleagues and they're talking about football or TV or whatever it is they're talking about, and you say, God, I love mathematics. And then you show them some that blows their little minds, and the teachers go, is that maths then, is it? And you say, yeah, it is. And they all go, that was really interesting and exciting and cool. You go, yeah, it is. That's what my subject's like. So go out there and bang the drum, I'd say.
Brilliant.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I've got my pound there, so I'll be.
You hang on to that, mate.
Until 2025, I've got that.
Yes. Really get 4 years down the line, I've got a quid. I need to make 5 more other bets, and then I'll have enough money to pay for a pint in a London pub. Hurrah!
Might have gone up by 2025, so you've got to keep up.
Yeah? Oh, God.
Yeah.
They can't go up anymore, can they?
No, I can't believe it's nearly a fiver for a pint, yeah.
So, anyway, bang the drum. And, things like, wasn't it cool that the last maths conf, did you notice on the last maths conf how many primary practitioners there were? It was amazing.
Yeah.
And compared to a few years ago, because we always want maths conf to be really open to anyone at all. So we want everyone to be able to come along. But we used to, it was difficult to find primary practitioners to come and talk about primary mathematics. And then the last one, there were loads. So, just growing that community of people who are willing to stand up and say, this subject is amazing. We adore it. And let me show you a dozen or so things that will make you adore it too. And doing all that's just really important. And growing that community more and more is a really important thing to do. So,
Definitely, it was really, really good. I mean, I caught up with one workshop that I missed at the time. The Kieran Mackel. He's even got a book, Thinking Deeply About Primary Mathematics. The Shannon Doherty. Already, we did a mass chat live with primary teachers, and I fully intend to do a load more of them, actually, various different aspects of it. And all those people, Lloyd, Shannon, Kieran, they absolutely love teaching the subject. You cannot help but be drawn by their absolute infection and like enthusiasm about it. And if the very least I can do is bring this kind of thing onto this Match Chat Live on Twitter and start fostering this community. People need role models. People need the Kieran Mackels who are writing their books, who have all that experience and are willing to share their experience through books. He runs his own podcast. Just get involved in any way, or if you are out there and you want to get involved in any shape or form, these platforms are more and more easily accessible, thanks to the internet. So brilliant. I'll wrap things up there. Another fantastic discussion. So if you are listening into the recording as well, do please keep the comments coming. You can even, if you have any specific questions for Mark, you can just use the hashtag #AskMark, and you will answer that in the blog. I've seen it's growing and it's fantastic. So the conversation is by no means finished. It's just it's always another phase of it, another stage. So keep it going. Check out the replay, and Mass Chat Live is going to move in it onto Thursday evenings. Saturdays are starting to get busy for people in a social way. Thank God for it. There's the lockdown lifts and people are doing Saturday kind of stuff on a Saturday rather than being cooked up at home. So I'm gonna find a more teacher friendly time. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks Mark for your time and returning. I feel, and not only that, just for all the time you spent in those early stages in Match Chat Live to set up this platform for LaSalle, for kind of all the CPD I received, for me to get to this point where I'm doing this kind of thing, and just spreading the knowledge and doing whatever part I can play.
Yeah, and it's a really important part, mate. And like us, it's what we can do. Just play our little part in helping teachers. We'll keep doing that as long as we possibly can. So, thank you very much for asking me back, and I look forward to watching the future ones. You should bring that gang on and do a primary special, I think.
Yes, I'll keep pushing. Yeah, brilliant. I will stop the recording and then we can just have a quick 5-minute chat and finish up there. And